Rink wide Vancouver. Pre-game, post-game, every game presented by Bodog and Sports Odds. The free casino games make it play at bodog.net. Wadden and JPat here with you. Feels weird to say the pre-game, post-game, every game off the start now because we don't have any pre-games or post-games to talk about. But we do cover, I guess, every game when it comes to the Vancouver Canucks and every topic when it comes to the Vancouver Canucks. And we got a good one today that we want to chat about.
But doesn't it make you pull your hair out? Like, that everybody else is having all this fun. And, you know, I mean, we deal with what we deal with. We can't make up Canuck games. They're not going to play any until September. But, you know, again, I always find myself at this time of the year sort of comparing. And we talked a little bit yesterday about dropping the Canucks into some of these series and how would they stack up. I mean, obviously you got to qualify for the playoffs first and foremost, and that's going to be the challenge for next season. But man, another night, just incredible action that we could talk about a little bit later on. And I don't know. I mean, I know I'm not alone. I see people on Twitter just like, oh, I want this so badly for this city. Just like, you know, again, the roller coaster of emotions and the overtime and the angst and everything else. Like, it's been an incredible first week of the playoffs.
Yeah. And I think too, it's just how close these series are as well. You know, like even, I know Boston Bruins were like by far the best team in the NHL this year. And I know they've been pushing to get Florida out right now, but the games are tight, right? Like there's nobody that's really miles ahead of one another at the moment. So yeah, in that regard. And then you look down the I-5 and look at what the Kraken were able to do last night. I mean, the second year in the league. And
the volume around that series is only going to go up here.
Oh, I know.
The longer they hang around, and if they ultimately knock off the defending champs, I mean, people in Vancouver are going to blow a gasket. Just so, yeah.
All right, well, let's take a look at this because you brought up this topic to me today, and I like it. The path to the Canucks to make the playoffs next year. And let's look at the facts here. 12 points short, right? They had 83 points this year. 95 got you in. Now, I'm wondering right off the bat here, two things sort of stick out to me. Obviously, that start really sewered the Canucks, if you really look at it, to start the season. Thatcher Demko being out, massive factor, obviously. But also, too, now the structure that they've sort of got built into their game through Rick Tocchet. Those two factors alone, to me, put the Canucks back in the conversation, I think, in terms of pushing for the playoffs next year. Now, of course, going to be a different roster, different lineup, so we don't really know what we're dealing with in that regard. But when I just look at those two factors right there and the gap that there was for them to make the playoffs, those two stand out to me.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. So let's kind of drill down on that. Like, as I sit here, do I think the Vancouver Canucks can pick up 6 wins, 12 points needed to get to 95 for next year? Yeah, absolutely. And of course, this is an assumption that Thatcher Demko stays relatively healthy. I mean, if they suffer a catastrophic injury, you saw what happened this year. But as we sit here in the offseason, let's just work on the premise that, you know, things are going to go, maybe that's a dangerous premise. Things are going to go right for the Vancouver Canucks. But for the sake of this argument, we'll give them Thatcher Demko's health at the very least. So, you know, from that, a full season of Demko, can I see them picking up the 6 wins needed to get to 95? Yeah, like 0-7 start. Even if they win half of those games, right there, they're ahead of the curve. Because let's give them 3 wins in those first 7 games that they ended up losing when they had leads in most of them. Now, all of a sudden, you need 3 more wins the rest of the way? Come on. Like, yeah, of course, they can figure out a way to grind out 3 additional wins. So, you know, when I look at a path back to the playoffs for the Canucks, I would say, first of all, they have to improve. There's no doubt you're not going to make it with 83 points. But it's not just about what do the Vancouver Canucks do, because every year is different and we don't know where the playoff bar is going to be. And if they get in, it means somebody's got to be squeezed out. And we can look at that in a sec. But just areas of improvement. And so much of it does start with Demko for a full season, providing the kind of goaltending that they had down the stretch. The penalty kill has to be better, doesn't it? Like, just can't be worse unless they add a few more expansion teams, but they're not prepared to do that.
What was it under Tocchet? I know you probably have the numbers. Like it was much improved, right?
It was better, but it couldn't be. You know what? It wasn't as good. I think we got blinded by all the shorthanded goals that they scored. And it felt like, I think, ended up being 21st in the league in the time that Tocchet was the coach. So still, you know, in the bottom third. And yeah, they crept over 70%, ultimately finished up just a shade over 70. But again, I think they're going to have to address that in the offseason. They have to hope that healthy Demko, a healthy Ilya Mikheyev, you know, if they go out and they bring pieces in, hopefully there are guys that can, you know, add to that role around this hockey club. But I do think, like, that sunk them on. I mean, how many post-game shows did we do in the early going where we were like, this can't continue? But guess what? It did for the most part. So yeah, it was better under Tocchet, but it has to get a whole lot better still. So I think, a better start to the season. And again, they're going to talk about that when they arrive at training camp, and nobody wants to hear it. Talk is cheap. Just get out there and get off to a way better start. Let's see what the schedule looks like. Is it going to start with another lengthy road trip? I would advise they maybe try something a little different after the last couple of years where they've started with long trips right off the hop. Having all those home games at the back end, yeah, great if you're in a playoff chase. But, if you're sunk, then you're left trying to sell tickets. And I mean, how many push for ticket sales down the stretch for games that nobody really wanted to watch? They just got to figure out a way to get off to a better start, stay with the pack, and then from there try and incrementally churn out some points. But, when I look at the roster that they've gotten, again, they're going to add to it, we think, but,
and subtract from it as well.
You're right. No, there's going to be turnover. Absolutely. That's a constant in pro sports. I guess when I start to look at improvement from within, realistically, Elias Pettersson, you hope that he can stay somewhere close to the level he was at. I don't know how much more. Even as guys are scoring and, offense is going up around the league, I think you're asking an awful lot to think that he's going to be, much more than 100 points. 100 points, it's incredible. But, I'm not sure that there's a ton more for him to give offensively. Can he continue to round out his game? Yeah, I think so. But then you look like Kuzmenko. I think we all think that, the shooting percentage tells you that he's got to take a step back, but he's still he's a goal scorer. That's what he does. And if he plays with Pettersson, that's going to produce some offense. JT Miller seemed to find his game again under Rick Tocchet, so I would anticipate that even with the new deal kicking in and maybe some pressure on him, I still think what we saw this year around 80 points, I think that's we don't know who his wingers are going to be, but he's a guy that factors in on the power play and all that kind of stuff. So I think the top end guys, as long as they stay healthy and can give you somewhere close to what they gave you this year, that's a big step in the right direction with some of those other areas that we already talked about. Then I guess the question is, can you get a little bit more from guys that have either underachieved or, some of these young players that are, they want, whether it's at Abbotsford or, some of the guys that finished the season here, can they take that next step? And, Tocchet knows that that's part of the challenge for him. And I'm not as bullish on that second part of the equation as I am on Elias Pettersson sort of establishing himself as somewhere close to a 100-point guy for the next couple of seasons. When I look a little further down the roster, you want to believe that, Nils Höglander maybe can make the jump back to the National Hockey League and be productive. But, I guess when I look at a Höglander or a Podkolzin, can they get to the level that Connor Garland and Brock Besser produced this year? I guess the contracts are different, but, if Höglander scores 15 to 20 goals, that's great for him. But, he really they move off Besser or Garland, then you're really just replacing those goals that those guys scored this year. So
is Höglander a replacement for, say, someone like Besser? To me, Höglander tops out, at least right now, as a third line guy. A third line guy that can produce a little bit, play a bit of a defensive role. To me, I think Brock Besser is a step above him in terms of offensive production. And if you are going to move off Brock Besser, I don't think that Nils Höglander is your perfect replacement.
No, I would agree with that. And I also think, too, Ilya Mikheyev, I don't know fully what to expect from Mikheyev. I mean, I want to see that he's completely healthy first and foremost. And
see, he seems like a third liner to me as well. But,
again, somebody has to play. And you're already plugging holes with Phil DiGiuseppe in your top six. If this team is going to make strides and improve, then they have to. I mean, somebody's got to play with. I mean, Beauvillier is still around. I suppose you could start the season with that line intact as your top line, but then, who plays with JT Miller? And you're right, on really good teams, I would agree with you, but this isn't a really good team and it's not stacked. So your third line guys sort of by default become second liners on this team.
Are you paying Ilya Mikheyev to be a top six guy? Because what is he, 4'7", 4'9", something like that?
Yeah, I mean, he and Garland are essentially in the same ballpark, and then Besser obviously is mill and change more than that. And, the jury is out on all three of those guys to be more than they are. They've all been all right. Mikheyev obviously played through injury and only played half a season. The other guys have been okay, but I don't think that they have, provided value for the contracts that the Canucks have given them. And so
that's the risk with free agency too, right? It's always overpaying free.
But again, as we're trying to figure out the path forward for this group, if Besser comes back, all these same conversations that we've had. And again, he can say all the things that he said last week about knowing the pressure's on and, challenging himself and training. But ultimately at this stage, like, he's got to come back and just do it. Like, enough talk, like, just get out there and become the player that you believe you could be.
Okay. So we know that they need to improve in the third line center position.
Yes.
Like, the third line has got to be like one of those two-way lines where they can't not give you production. They have to, right?
Totally. Yep.
So we know that that's the hole right there. But everything else the Canucks have right now, today, if they're to fill that hole with, let's just say a 40-point guy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that enough with the team that they have right now? Do you believe that they could make up that 12 points and be a playoff team next year?
Yes, I think they can. I think with Tocchet continuing to get them to play the way that he wants them to play, and with Thatcher Demko down the stretch, I think that they're going to play tighter games. I think that they've got enough offense that generally the offense wasn't an issue with this group. And so, I guess if you can fill that third line center role, they've got enough options and enough pieces to sort of flesh out that bottom six. Again, we talked yesterday about, do they have enough edge and enough grit to be a playoff team, or, once they get to the playoffs, that's a different conversation. Based on the roster that they've got, I think there's enough there. Now, people are probably screaming, like, you guys have talked about goaltending, you talked about forwards. Hello.
It's going to go there.
Yeah. And obviously that's where the conversation does have to go. But, they made the trade. Philip Hronek, again, his health, if he's healthy, he helps them. He is an upgrade. He's a piece that they have been missing without a question on that right side. But, how good can he be? Nobody knows the answer to that. How do they deploy him? That's going to be wild and fascinating for me. But, you've got Hughes, you've got Hronek, and then now you've got some more questions about, certainly there's the $8 million question that is OEL. And I don't know, like, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt for some reason. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm just charitable.
You're going to have to, I think. Canuck fans are going to have to. He's staying,
right,
man.
But again, it's one thing to say, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. If he shows up and he's no better, then what? Like, you started the season with him penciled in as one of your left side defenders, and now all of a sudden, then where do you go? So, there's some risk involved there, but for the sake of this argument, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he can play, that there's something still there for him. And then again, we come back to, okay, what do they do with Ethan Bear? It certainly sounds like both sides want to get a deal done here.
Yeah.
So we don't know what that defense is. And that's why it can be difficult to sort of conduct this exercise without knowing all the pieces. I just think, again, can the group that they've got with the sort of framework that we know, the players that they have under contract, can they pick up 6 additional wins, 12 points? Yes. But then it's a question of, is that enough? Like, maybe the playoff bar is higher than that next year. Like, the playoff bar in the East this year was 92, I think. So you just, every year's different. You never know ultimately what it's going to take. But I do want to believe that there is, they're young star players, that there's still room for them to grow and get better and take this team where it needs to go. I guess a bit of a wild card in all of this is, and we've had this discussion before, is the end goal of getting to the playoffs? And it better not be, right? But if it's just about getting to the playoffs, then sure, this management group can trade its first rounder and try and pick up a quick fix, a piece that you can plug into the lineup. But to me, it's not about getting to the playoffs. It's about building the team that's going to make the playoffs, but then, be a worthy opponent for whoever they meet in the first round. And maybe after all these years of getting to the playoffs, maybe you don't get out of the first round. But I certainly want to see a team that isn't just about creeping above the playoff bar, just to get punted in the first round. Like, that's not, I don't think anybody in Vancouver wants that. Like, I think after all these dark years, it's about, starting to build this group so that in this window, while you've got Thatcher Demko under contract, while you still have Quinn Hughes at an affordable price, like, this is go time. And so that's, I guess, my concern is that, look, this management group traded a first rounder to bring in Philip Hronek. Are they willing to do it again? I hope not, but that would certainly change the equation of, can they get to the playoffs next year? Yeah, but that would feel like a shortcut, and I don't want to say cheating, but I don't think in the best interest of the hockey club to take that approach.
Well, and that's the thing though, as they've sort of built this team over the years and all the sort of shortcuts that they tried to take, they're now in a situation where they've got the frontline center, they've got the frontline defender, they've got the frontline goalie, so that it has to be go time. right? Like you almost can't just be happy with just the playoffs because they skipped the baby steps almost, and they tried to cut through them. It didn't work. And now here they are, guys are in their prime and it's go time, and guys you're built around are in their prime. Like they're ready to go. Right. So you kind of can't just be satisfied with just being a playoff team at this point. Maybe the first year, like maybe get in there next year, but you have to be starting to think that this team is building itself towards being a contender because of the pieces that they already have.
Right. And we talked about a little bit earlier is, okay, so if the Canucks do get in, somebody's got to come out. They're not making an exemption to have 9 teams in the playoffs next year. So, when you look at, like, they finished with 83 points. Winnipeg had the second wild card at 95. The Jets are going to be a team, it's not looking good for them now. Lou Scheifele. Before that, it was Josh Morrissey. They're without Nick Ehlers. Like, that's tough. And they were already going to be in tough. But, man, like, they looked so good in that opener against Vegas. And then things have sort of spiraled out of control. So, are they going to blow it up in Winnipeg? Maybe. So, yeah, it's conceivable that the Jets take a step back. But they've still got a fair bit of talent on that hockey club. Beyond that, Seattle was a 100-point team, and I don't think the Kraken are showing any signs of slowing down. Like the way that they're playing, and they're getting this done here in the playoffs. Like, I think people are forgetting, like, Andrei Burakovsky is out. Like, they're doing this without one of their best players and giving Colorado fits already here 4 games into this thing. So, I think the Kraken, maybe they surprised in year 2. They're not going to surprise anybody in year 3, but I think the way that they play, the style they play, the spread offense, and that defense that they've got, and then, maybe they inject a Shane Wright next year as well. Like, there's potential that they get better here, so then you have to look above, like, those are the wildcard teams, Seattle and Winnipeg. I mean, all the teams that took divisional spots, Minnesota was a low team at 103 points. That's 20 points better than the Vancouver Canucks. So,
but this shows you really that start, though, right? Like just how bad that start was for the Canucks and how much it puts you in behind the 8 ball, and you're chasing the whole season at that point, right?
And the other thing too is, like, I'm looking at the teams above them that have to fall out. Of course, there are teams below them that want to
Calgary, yeah.
Well, but even, like, where does Connor Bedard fall, and what kind of impact does he have right away? And look, maybe it's foolish to say, hey, teams below the Canucks, but look what Seattle did year over year. Like, it's not completely out of the realm that, with the right pieces and teams that have salary cap space and, maybe can squeeze a top end player or 2 out of another team that is up against it. Like, all of a sudden, I think we see that more now in the NHL, that it's possible in an off season to make significant strides if you take advantage of teams that, have to basically break up the band, and then, a player like Bedard, and it's not just Bedard. Like, this kind of feels like the kind of draft that, 2 or 3 of the top end guys could get plugged right into the National Hockey League. And you saw it with a player like Matty Beniers. Like, he made the jump to the NHL late last year, like full time. He's rookie of the year, 50 some odd points, and certainly doesn't look out of place here in the playoffs as well. No. So, young guys can have an immediate impact, the ones that are taken at the top of the draft. And we know that this draft is particularly special. So, I mean, the Canucks have their work cut out for them, especially given their salary cap situation. But, again, and maybe it's me just kind of, again, getting lost in this notion of, man, I want the playoffs back in Vancouver so badly, watching them, that, I want to believe that this can be a playoff team next year, because I want to cover a playoff team. I want to be doing rink wides after playoff games.
I mean, just watching those games last night, like, wow, I would love to be doing a post game right now. just give me a game. I don't even care which one it was. Talk about any of them, right? So, and no, Calgary wasn't below them, but I mean that Calgary was below the playoff bar.
Yeah.
So, and they're one of those teams, like, yeah, they had a shit year, but they made some pretty drastic changes, and in those drastic changes, they got some good players. They just didn't have good seasons. So to think that Calgary is just going to, take a step back would be, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they're going to be right there as well. So yes, a lot more that we can dive into with the Canucks when it comes to the path to the playoffs, but good start there. And we'll see exactly, what they can do to improve the roster going into next season. All right. Well, all that hope of playoffs in Vancouver, there are actually playoffs going on in the Stanley Cup final, or playoffs, that is. And let's start with last night's games. The Leafs with a 5-4 OT win. They're now up 3-1 in the series. It was 4-1, JPat. And if you're a Leafs fan, that makes you cringe, probably curl up into a ball when you hear that. But no. This time they came back, and this time it wasn't them that was up 4-1 as they pull off the improbable in a 5-4 OT win, taking both games in Tampa.
Yeah, and that game last night it's funny because I've watched so much of the first round, and I've seen it from so many of the teams, like they just don't have it. And you're thinking like they're going to get run out of the rink here. And I was thinking about the Leafs through the second period, like they weren't winning any battles. Guys didn't look terribly engaged. And at 4-1 into the third, and I'm thinking, all right, like they're just going to accept that it's not their night. And then when Austin Matthews scored, make it 4-2, we have seen that 2-goal lead. Like it's no longer a joke. Like it is the worst lead in hockey. Like I think the team that cuts into the lead has belief. The other team, I think, starts to panic a little bit or recognizes like, oh, if they get the next one, then we're really in trouble. And boy, I didn't think Tampa did much to up its game at that point, and credit to the Leafs and get it to overtime. And yeah, I mean, look, eventually, at some point, the Leafs were going to get out of the first round. They're not there yet, but they have put themselves in position now.
Leaf fans are screaming at you if they're listening to this.
But also Tampa, I mean, 3 straight trips to the Cup, like, as good as they are.
And Vasilevsky is starting to show some holes. He is. Like, he doesn't look like the monster that he is, right? So
sure, and at the other end, like, let's point out the fact that I did on Twitter last night, like, Samsonov hasn't given up a goal in the third period in either of those games. So, yeah, you've got all the star power on the Leafs, and sure, you can chip away, but all it takes is, 1 goal back the other way. And the comeback effort is all for naught, and it can be deflating. And so maybe he's given up a few too many earlier in hockey games. But man, when the chips are down, Leafs are getting goaltending that, that's been a downfall of theirs in playoffs past. So, you're not asking them to be like lights out world beater. Just make the saves you're supposed to, make a few more saves than the guy at the other end of the ice. And certainly he is doing that. So when you think of the way the series started to here we are praising Ilya Samsonov and the goaltending the Leafs are getting, like, good on them. I mean, it feels like they're about to
oh boy, here we go,
turn a page, but there is still work to be done. Yes.
Let's bring it around to Vancouver, though. The last 2 OT heroes for the Leafs, the prides of West Vancouver.
That's right.
Morgan Riley, Alex Kerfoot. Mm-hmm. So there you go. How about the Devils?
That was a weird one to me because, I mean, the Rangers made it look so easy in the first couple of games, and then the fact that they haven't been able to score at home, and the road teams won all 4 games. But again, and I'm flipping back and forth, and I'm watching those 2 games, and the Rangers, it took them a while, took them into the third period to get on the scoreboard, tied it at 1, and I thought, okay, this was going to kick in the butt, get them in gear. They were so flat the rest of the way. Like, the Rangers looked like it was an exhibition game, which was crazy to me. They had a chance to go up 3-1 and take a full stranglehold on that series, and now all of a sudden, it's now best of 3. Devils have home ice again. Their best players are starting to come alive. Jack Hughes is, he's finding his way, as I think we all expected he would. And all of a sudden, some of the top end guys in the Rangers, like, nowhere to be found. So yeah, but that's probably got to be the most bizarre series. I know that road teams have had a ton of success, but the Rangers made it look so easy in those first couple of games. And now they find themselves up against it.
Yeah, I really love what I'm seeing from Jack Hughes as well. He's becoming one of my favorite players in the league. Golden Knights and Jets 4-2. The Knights take down the Jets 3-1 now for VGK in the series. Stranglehold on that one. And for everything that you mentioned earlier about the pieces that the Jets are missing, just feels like Winnipeg is down and out.
Yeah, that was tough for Scheifele. He had the breakaway chance and then crashes into the end boards and tried to stay in the game, but you could tell that he was hurt, and then obviously had to leave the hockey game. Maybe the strangest goal of the playoffs, that jump ball that was Alex Pietrangelo mistimed his jump. Like, he should have been able to just bat that thing to the corner, but whatever the case, made it interesting at the very least. But yeah, from the way Winnipeg played the first game in Vegas to now, kind of feels like they're being led to their demise in game number 5. And if you're Vegas, you have a chance to finish off the Jets in 5. Meanwhile, all these other series have the feel now that they're going to go the distance, like Minnesota, Dallas, Edmonton, LA, and Seattle, Colorado. So if you're Vegas, to get through the first round in 5 and sit back and let these other teams absolutely pummel each other, that's a huge advantage for them. So let's see. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself and want to write Winnipeg off. They've still got some good players, but that's just an awful lot. No Morrissey, no Scheifele, and they haven't had Nick Ehlers the entire series. So up against it.
It's funny, though. I know everything sort of gets put under a microscope when it comes to Toronto and how they, how many cracks at it they've had. And, they're going to blow it up after this year if they don't do it. Like, look at Winnipeg. And I know you talked about, what perhaps they might have to make some drastic changes, but like how many kicks of the can have they had with this core group now? Yeah. And they just can't, I mean, I know they made a conference finals, a little bit different situation in terms of, what Toronto hasn't done in the playoffs, but at the same time too, they both haven't won Stanley Cups, right? So with that core, you're looking at guys that are going into their free agent year. Scheifele's going into his free agency year next year. Blake Wheeler, as well as Connor Hellebuck. So, they got some decisions to make. Brandon Dillon, DeMello as well. Like there's some significant guys that are going to be going into their UFA year next year. So I'll see exactly what this offseason's like for the Winnipeg Jets, but it looks like it's coming quickly here the way that Vegas is controlling that series. The Kraken, as we mentioned earlier, with the 3-2 victory in OT over the Avs, controversial hit on by Cale Makar on Jared McCann. I'm seeing both sides of it right now. I got some friends that are Kraken fans, and they're, they want Cale Makar's head on a platter right now. Other people saying Cale Makar's not that player. Regardless, it's 2-2 in the series now. The Avs or the Kraken have the Stanley Cup champions. I don't want to say on the ropes, but they definitely got him in a fight.
Yeah, and if Makar gets suspended, and by the time people listen to this, the league may have ruled ridiculously late. And, funny, you can say, Cale Makar's not that kind of player. Well, Cale Makar just did that, so I guess somewhere deep down he is that kind of player. It did harken back. I saw people harkening, the Dale Hunter on Pierre Turgeon going way back, and actually I dug that up and looked at it, and, there are some similarities. Like, it was just so late. That was the thing for me that, McCann has his chance and kind of starts to circle into the corner. They collide once. Like, there's a little bit of contact, and I thought, okay, that'll be the end of it. And then, nope, Makar, saw an opportunity, I guess. And like where it goes from here, it's in the league's hands now, but what a missed opportunity for Colorado without 40-goal Jared McCann the rest of the night. Who knows? Again, I hope that he's okay. I hope he comes back and is available to the Kraken. But last night he was out of that game. You had to put the hammer down. Man, Mikko Rantanen, though, again, tried his best single-handedly to will Colorado back to win that. That guy's just incredible. I pointed out on Twitter last night. A 10th. Like, every draft year is different. I get it. But we spent a lot of yesterday's program talking about Vasily Podkolzin as a 10th overall pick. He is not Mikko Rantanen. Man, that 2015, I mean, that was McDavid, Eichel, but that first round was just stacked. And to
you know what though? I saw a lot of people, because I saw your tweet, and you're right. Like that top 10 is just, it's stacked. And I see a lot of people, Rantanen should have been 2. Can Mitch Marner get a little bit of love here? Like,
yeah.
I mean, the guy's been a first team NHLer for the last couple seasons, and he was 4th overall. So, But you are right. Like at 10, Rantanen, oh my God. You imagine if the Canucks got a player like Rantanen at 10?
Right. Like, and, it's not like San Jose whiffed. They got Timo Meier. Just an incredible, I mean, it was the same draft that Barzell and Thomas Chabot and Kyle Connor and Brock Besser. Like, it was just one of the great drafts in recent memory. But for Colorado, they already had Nathan McKinnon as their centerpiece, and then to land, that kind of player at 10th. And he's
How does a guy that big go to 10th?
Yeah, I'd have to go back, and I don't know what the flaws and the knocks were on him, because the guy's just an absolute beast. But, Seattle speed in overtime. Jaden Schwartz forces the issue. Manson takes a penalty. And, this is incredible. I was looking at this earlier. So the Kraken are tied 2-2 with the champs. Like, what an incredible position for them to be in after 4 games. They've got a home ice victory, an overtime victory now. People are into it. The league's taking notice. And you say, how are the Kraken doing it? Well, they're being led in scoring by Justin Schultz, the defenseman, with 5 points. Like 5 points in 4 games. That's not going to blow anybody away. Nobody scored more than 2 goals for the Kraken. 4 games into this thing. 11 guys, though, have scored a goal. And that is Seattle Kraken hockey right there. It's just, they just spread the offense. And so on any given night, they lose Jared McCann. Yeah, it's a big deal, but there's enough offense there and enough balance and spread scoring that other guys step up, and that's certainly the case. Everly gets the overtime winner, but Daniel Sprong scored. They get a goal from a defenseman, me banging the drum. Will Borgen scored last night. Jonas Siegenthaler scored. Morgan Riley scored again. Like, goals are being scored by defensemen around the National Hockey League and at crunch time. And so just another example of that. But yeah, it's just more than anything, it's the speed and the balance of that Kraken team, and they are absolutely relentless. And the Colorado Avalanche are finding that out the hard way.
Yeah, and they're pushing the Cup champs 2 seasons into their existence. How do you think Canuck fans are feeling about that? Rink-wide Vancouver is presented by Bodog Sports Odds, poker tips, free casino games. It's time to play. Breaking news, JPat.
And we don't have the budget for the sound effects, so that was sort of my my attempt.
Cale Makar, 1 game suspension, even though we just mentioned it a minute ago. But yeah, as we record this, it came down. So
plot thickens. I think it's right. I think it had to be. I know that they gave it the major and then reviewed it, and then he got a minor penalty on the ice. But you can't have that in the game. You can't, even for star players. Like, there has to be a price to be paid. And now it gets that much. I know they're back home and they still have home ice advantage, but that is a massive blow. You don't replace Cale Makar. Like, a guy like Bowen Byram will have to step up, but we know what Makar means to the Colorado Avalanche. Now, I guess if there is, something for them to draw on it, he missed enough time this year that they have played without him and won without him. And it is just 1 game, but still, like, the door is open now. If you're the Seattle Kraken, you got to take advantage of that. So, wow. Let's see where this thing goes. Buckle up, because I think there's going to be a few more twists and turns in this series before finally a winner is declared.
It's going to be fascinating who comes out of the West, really, because it's just, who knows really right now. All right. Bodog best bet from yesterday. I had no goal in the first 9 minutes and 30 seconds of the Leafs Tampa Bay. Did you see what time the first goal was?
I tried to talk you out of it.
You saw what happened? First goal was at 9:57. I beat it by 27 seconds. So got myself a dub, my second of the playoffs. I'm looking at this tonight, JPat. In the Minnesota-Dallas series, Kirill Kaprizov hasn't really broken out in the series yet. He's just got 1 goal. They've been suffocating him. And that's one of the things, I think we brought it up yesterday on the postgame, or on the postgame. I wish we were doing a postgame pod. On the pod from yesterday was, just how teams would target Elias Pettersson. Mm-hmm. And I kind of looked at Kirill Kaprizov because they're kind of similar in size, stature. And you can kind of see that's what the Stars are doing to him. But I see him getting a goal tonight. Anytime goal scorer at plus 130, Kirill Kaprizov, maybe a power play goal, something like that. But I see him getting on the board tonight.
I just wonder too, like, he missed so much time down the stretch. Like, I can't imagine that he's at the top of his game.
Sure.
But you're not wrong. Like, Dallas has thrown a blanket over that guy, and they've done a nice job of it so far. Much the way that give the LA Kings a ton of credit. How long can they keep Connor McDavid under wraps? I know that he did score in game 3, but hasn't been the McDavid, or game 2, was it?
No, in game 3 he had 2.
Oh, that's right. Yes. Yeah. But he, it hasn't been the Connor McDavid show. It may still turn out to be that way, but the
difference is that the Oilers still have Leon Draisaitl to fall back on. It's crazy. It's crazy. But I love what the Kings are doing in that series as well. We asked a question today on @RinkWideVan, poll question today, asking you, has the Abbotsford Canucks playoff run caught your attention? And right now, it's really early. Less than 200 votes are in, but 74.7% of the vote are saying yes. I'm wondering how many people are being absolutely truthful about this right now. Like, were they on it in that first series? Who knows? Regardless, we did have one person, though, quote tweet us, and this is Gord, and he says 2 wins equals run, LOL. I mean, it's a 2 out of 3 series, or so. Like, it is a run. They go into the second round. No, I mean, if it had been a 4 or 7, is it a run?
Hey, when it comes
are we
to
quibbling over
Canucks,
this right now?
When it comes to the Canucks and playoff success at any level, 2 wins, I'm with you.
Yes.
I'm okay calling that a run because, look, they're guaranteed 3 more games at least. So, let's see. I mean,
they won a round. They won a round, and they don't ask you how many it is. Just, did you win it? Yeah. And they did. So
I think last year they were done 2 and out. They, this is a step in the right direction. And now they're stepping up a weight class against the best team in the AHL, and it gets going on Wednesday. I think, in the social media era, I think it's a lot easier for people to, take an interest, right? Like, you don't have to watch the games. You don't have to go to the games, but people are following along. They know the storylines, and in a sense that there is an interest level, certainly. Now, maybe that's primarily the hardcores and the ones that really invested, but, the deeper they go, and, if they throw a punch here in the first game and, knock the Calgary Wranglers off in the opener, like, again, I think the further Abbotsford goes, stands to reason that the more interest that there's going to be. And, we'll be talking about the games after the games, and, we're not to the point of doing post-game pods for the Abby Canucks, but haven't rolled it out entirely.
Exactly.
But we're not there yet.
I'm curious if the crowd goes for 3-4. Well, I mean, at least for 3. But I'm just curious to see, if they end up getting, a sellout there in Abbotsford. And again, like I mentioned on an earlier podcast, it's really great for the community. And I think it's a really cool thing that they're having some success while the NHL team doesn't. So good on the Abby Canucks. And let's see if they can get themselves a W in Calgary. Going to be tough, though. AHL's best team, right? All right. This has been another edition of the Rink Wide Vancouver podcast presented by Bodog for Jeff Patterson. I'm Andrew Wadden. Remember, Rink Wide is the show that always scores.